The 1985 NBA draft was rigged. So today, the NBA is one of the biggest sports organizations in the entire world, but it wasn't always like this. In the 1980s, the league was struggling with viewership, with ratings, and with public perception. So I've been watching basketball since I was around 6 years old, and ever since I've been alive, the league has kept a clean image. Even though there's been some controversies, the league has been pretty family friendly. So the 1985 NBA draft was really sketchy, the circumstances surrounding it and the actual draft process itself, and it was too coincidental to not have been tampered with. The league showed blatant favoritism to its most popular team by basically gifting the first pick to their most popular team, and they gave them the first pick. And that in itself just spreads out to the whole of the league showing favoritism for their big market teams. So when the league shows favoritism towards their large market teams, the competitive integrity of the league is damaged. There's a huge draw for the executives of the NBA itself to try and actively make their most popular and big name teams the best in the league. But if they artificially do that, it leads to more corruption, something that the league has faced from time to time again. So why is showing favoritism to the big name teams and the most profitable teams bad for the league? So if the NBA favors these big teams, it just casts aside all of the smaller teams in the more remote areas, teams such as in Oklahoma or Minnesota. Those teams, they kind of just get put aside, and the fans of those teams, they feel like, the league doesn't really care for them, and they'll just stop supporting the league altogether. And so also the less popular teams already, they have a really difficult time trying to win because the players, they simply just don't want to play for the team. Many of these athletes, many of these basketball players, they're young and rich, and they would much rather play in Los Angeles or Miami or even New York rather than playing somewhere in Minnesota or something. So tampering the odds to favor the teams, the large teams, that snowballs everything together and kind of just destroys the competitive integrity, and you'll just see the same teams over and over in the finals every year because they're just favoring the big names. And gifting players to profitable teams makes it so the best team in the league doesn't always win. So a team is from the top down. They usually, if the team is the most well-run and has the best players, they should be winning the championship every year. But if the league makes it so some teams are artificially better than others, then that's just the best team doesn't always win. It's just the teams that benefit from the league giving them and breaking the rules for them, they usually are going to be the ones that are winning. So showing favoritism to the large market teams is a really terrible and bad thing to do. So why did David Stern, the commissioner at the time in 1985, purposely tamper with the draft? So at the time, the NBA was really struggling. Viewership and ratings were going down, and they kept on going down for years on end. And it was said that the results in the 1978 NBA Finals were down 22% compared to other years, and that's pretty massive for a sport that was struggling at the time. So the best teams in the league were small market teams, and they didn't have as much draws. Teams such as the Washington Bullets and the Seattle Supersonics were the teams at the top of the league at the time. They don't have as much draw as the Los Angeles Lakers or the New York Knicks, teams that have huge brand recognition. And it was said that the financial situation was so bad that the league had come close to disbanding 6 of its 23 teams. Also, public perception was at an all-time low as well. The league was seen as very amateurish and was filled with athletes that they were not great role models. There was a cocaine problem that was so widespread that the Los Angeles Times reported that 75% of the players in the league were on drugs. And so that did not make the NBA the most advertiser friendly, and because of that, the league suffered. Also, simply put, the NBA just does better when they have the best players in the league on the big city teams. Having the face of the NBA play in like Brooklyn or in New York or Los Angeles, that's going to be better for the NBA rather than having the best player in the league play in like Oklahoma. And so by giving the best player in the draft and a guaranteed star to the New York Knicks, which was the largest franchise in the league, that would bring back like basketball in a sense. And to back it up, even the most viewed game of the NBA Finals was in 1998 when Michael Jordan was on the Chicago Bulls. Chicago was a huge city, and the face of the league was on a big name team. So how do we stop the ongoing corruption of showing favoritism to these teams and try to make amends for what has happened? So corruption in sports, and more specifically in the NBA, is not a new topic. There have been teams and referees that break the rules all the time, but that shouldn't be the reason as to why we shouldn't stop it. Just because it's been going on doesn't mean we shouldn't put an end to it. I think that leagues should investigate the shady practices that go on within the behind the scenes and the internal operations. The league could establish a third-party institute that kind of investigates the league and make sure that there's fairness all throughout, kind of like a checks and balances thing. The league could also implement more policies in order to ensure fairness amongst the teams. They have tried some already, but most of them have kind of backfired. For example, they try to make it so contracts that were more favorable for small market teams, but it kind of just ended up backfiring. And a small step that we can take as just individuals to kind of stop all this is to support your local team and or your team in general that you like, and no matter how small they are, because the reason why the league right now pushes for star players to go to the big cities is because it draws in viewers. But if there's nothing to gain from having the best players on the big market teams, then they wouldn't push for it. And so if we just support your local teams regardless of if they're doing well or poorly, then I feel like that would lessen the pushing of big name players to big name teams. So the 1985 draft, with its unproven legitimacy, is just a small problem in the much larger picture. I just used this one event that was really shady, and I believe that was rigged, to talk about the larger problem within the entire league and sports in general. I feel like right now there's too many draws and not enough consequences for the league to try to have their big name players on these really brand recognizable teams. And so I feel like the league needs to kind of do some inspection and try to make a change, and fans can also kind of help with this change by continuing to show support for their teams. And all in all, I want to say that nothing is really perfect. While the ethics of this entire showing favoritism to teams and even possibly rigging the draft, it's very questionable and probably illegal. The commissioner at the time, David Stern, did get his intended result, which was to grow the NBA. The NBA now is cleaned up its image and has pulls in billions every year now. And the sport is growing, but it came at a cost. And one little note, I just wanted to say that I didn't get into the specific details as to why I thought that the NBA was rigged. I don't think that many of you guys would be that interested in knowing about the specifics of the sport rules. So I just used this one event to talk about the whole, as like a small event to segue into like the larger picture of sports leagues in general favoring their more profitable teams. So yeah.